sort of switch on their videos, audios, and give us one word on what, one wish that you have for everybody on the group today. Just turn on your video, audio one by one. Just one wish that you have for everyone today. Go ahead. Yes, Rajesh.
Happy day.
Be happy to all of you.
Okay.
And keep it smiling.
Great. Go ahead. I am not facilitating. Whoever wants to go ahead next, you can unmute and share your wishes for everyone. Jagdish, you're unmuted.
A happy day for all.
Okay. Thank you, Sister Mary.
Be energetic with a smile on your face.
That everyone feels a little more healthier today.
I would say get into the Friday mode and just have a great weekend ahead.
Hari. Great.
Have a good day and a good weekend.
I just hope everybody gets a good today, gets a chance to do at least one good deed a day.
Okay. And I wish a peaceful day and a more contentful day with joy.
Thank you.
No. Ready for a good session.
Good.
No pressure.
I hope everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, let's hope we all have a very productive.
Yeah. I hope he's hoping everybody has a productive day. I think, and then somebody else wanted to go. Yeah, Sumati.
Yeah, I wish everyone a good day, and we would have a powerful day today, power-packed day. Enjoy this session.
To carry the theme from yesterday. Powerful.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I wish everyone will have an interactive day. Since we are continuing our workshop for the second day, I wish everybody will have a joyful and interactive day today.
Great, great, great. Anybody else's wishes to be sent out into the universe?
My wish for the whole group would be, including my own self, that everything that we are listening to in these sessions, we are able to, think of how does this apply to me and my work and my life, and stay with that question throughout. So.
Augustine is wishing good health to everybody. Okay. I wish that that we become closer friends today. Does Rupa, Bindya, sorry, Bindya already shared. Manisha, Rajendran. Anybody?
I wish everyone to be very energetic today during the session and after the session, and maybe for the whole life.
Okay, great.
And a fruitful day. Fruitful day.
Sorry, Manisha?
I wish
Fruitful
everyone
day.
a fruitful day.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you. If I've missed somebody, please just type it in the chat box. But we will sort of move into the next session today. And it's a very exciting one. It's funny, tables have turned. I get to do the introducing, Shalini. But I think today we are staying with the question that we sort of ended yesterday on. We ended the day thinking about how does power play in organizations, and therefore how does it affect organizations, and therefore how do organizations deal with this, and how do leaders within organizations deal with it. So today is organizations. Today is all about organizations, understanding organizations as units, as stories, as different parts. And I think without giving too much away, I think both Shalini and I are going to present stories of two different organizations. We're going to talk about two different organizations. So the next sort of 40 minutes, we just want you to immerse in sort of some storytelling, listen deeply, take some notes if you need to, and then we'll discuss what we feel. But there's some very important threads in both of these stories that you will want to take ahead in the rest of the session. So enjoy the next 40 or so minutes. Shalini, how do you want to do this? You're going to do the presentation and then make room for questions, etc. later, right?
Yeah, sure. We can do that.
Okay. Go ahead. So, yeah. So we start with Shalini, and I hand it over.
Great. So I want you to know this morning I'm definitely a little loopy. So I'm sometimes not even framing grammatically correct sentences. But so when that happens, I'm going to just blame it on my, flu. Two is, just great to see all of you back in class. I heard that, all of you were extremely engaged and supportive even in the call yesterday. And like Arundhati said, we are slowly now moving from looking at, the self as a leader to some of the larger aspect of what actually means to be an organization, and what does it mean to be a leader or an individual in an organization. Because a lot of you must have already noticed in your own careers and wherever you're working already that there is, an individual value, and then there is an organization value. And not always is it aligned. Sometimes there is tension, there is conflict. We're going to slowly uncover those layers as we proceed from this webinar onwards. So you're going to listen to two stories today. Kamalakanan sir, welcome to the call. And it'll be, if you want to say a quick hi to the group, please do that. Okay, I guess. Great, and that'll be great. So if you want to speak, please unmute yourself. But if you're not speaking, it's just good to, mute yourself. So then, it's just quite a, Rupa is going to look out for that. So if, she might have to mute some of you, especially if there's a lot of background noise. So do watch out for that. Great. If you're ready for this first story today, I'd like you to go to your chats and show me some excitement. So either you can put a word or, give me a sound or something, Are you ready for the first story of the day? Okay, great. I can get some reactions. Rizzo's, giving me a clapping signal. Okay. India is excited. Himani says, boom. Great. Jagdish, thank you. Mary. Sister Selvi, Manisha, awesome. Anybody else who is like, great, thank you, Anand. All right. So thanks, Angela. I'm going to share my screen. And at some point my internet gets choppy, then, Rupa, you can let me know. I have another internet, so I can always switch. So just give me 1 second. Great. So here's the thing, in today's story, we've tried to bring you two completely drastically different examples. One is from the civil society space, and you will look at it in a bit. But we also wanted to, go out of the civil society space and really try and look at the same factors that affect a civil society organization, and perhaps, diagnose, does it affect, other kinds of organizations, whether they are startups and whether they are for-profit organizations. And we've tried to draw like a parallel. And some of you who are, people who like to go to gyms and, or exercise, you might have heard this name called cult fitness quite a bit. Specifically, if you are, in one of those metro cities. How many of you have heard of cult fitness? Could you put it on your chat box that I've heard, I've never heard, something like that? That'd be great. And you don't have to worry about it either ways, because the agenda of the story is that, I personally feel that cult fitness should just pay me for, promoting them so many times on Emerging Leaders through these stories. Okay. Himani, yeah, you and I think we both are like big cult fitness fans. Absolutely. Okay, great. So if you know of them, and specifically if you're a member of Cult Fitness, then I'd like you to enjoy the story from a user's point of view. And if you've not heard of them, it's fine, because you're going to get to know about them by end of the next 30 odd minutes. I want you to know that I have nothing to do with Cult Fitness, right? I'm not a stakeholder, I'm not a shareholder, I'm not an employee. I'm just a user. I'm somebody who started subscribing to Cult Fitness way back in 2017, and I got completely obsessed with one of the exercise formats, which was weightlifting. And it became my primary go-to form of exercise over the last several years. And I'm bringing you the story because I feel that there are some great lessons in Cult Fitness that we can actually take, especially because we all on the call are from the civil society space. So why not just go out and look at something which is different, which is unfamiliar, so because sometimes some of the best learning also happens from that context. And yet we will come back to the civil society space in a bit. So I hope all of you can travel with me for the next 30 minutes or so. Like I told you, my journey with Cult Fitness started largely because I just fell in love with lifting weights. And I also felt that as a woman, when you start lifting weights, it just means something very different, and specifically because most of your weightlifting classes, unlike perhaps other forms of yoga and dance, often have very few women in those sessions. So I always found it very liberating being able to think about not having to shrink, but being able to expand, and I found that to be a counter narrative to all the ideas of fitness that women are asked to consume, that they must shrink, but they may not think of expanding. And I wanted to rebel against those ideas. And that's how really I became like this cult fan way back in 2018. So this story is really as a user. A lot of it is gathered from some of the instructors who became my friends over a period of time, and a lot of it is also from the internet. There are two gentlemen that you see on your screen right now, Rishabh Tilang and Ritesh Tilang, and they are essentially the brainchild behind this Cult Fitness. Behind them, you can see their gym, right? So unlike a typical gym, most Cult Fitness centers don't have machines at all. because they make you exercise with your body, so you have to jump, squat, box. There's a lot of martial arts. So you will not find a treadmill, for example, inside a cult fitness center. Rishabh and Ritesh are both fond of martial arts. They go to Thailand, they discover Muay Thai, and they said, oh, wow, what if we were to bring this similar concept to India and start with that? So they started in 2016 with just one single center and just two young men, just excited about exercising. And that's all this was. We're going to very specifically look at one protagonist in the story, and that is Rishabh, the person whose face I have circled, looks a little grumpy here, but what he doesn't know in 2016 is that his idea is going to generate hundreds of millions of dollars in investment. And this is what he doesn't know about it. If he knew about it, I feel his expression will be very different in this photograph, actually. So how did they, make their first millions, actually? Mukesh Bansal, who's the founder of Myntra.com, walks into cult fitness, loved it, and said, oh, wow, I would like you to build this everywhere, and puts $3 million in the first 3 months. And that's really how the cult fitness expanded. I'd like you to pay attention to the fact, some of the other smaller things of the story, which is how something that you're passionate about starts off as an idea and then begins to scale, begins to become a business. And then what is happening to the organization and the individual in this whole process? So I'd like you to stay with that thought as I go ahead. When we are in the civil society space, we often speak of constituencies, right? Quest Alliance's constituency is young people, for example, or trainers. Very quickly, if you could put in your chat box, who is your constituency when you are working with your demographic? Could you name those constituencies, please, in the chat box, and I'll quickly read that out.
Shalini, could you say that again?
So I said, if you look at the word constituency, we use it in the civil society space a lot. And, for Quest Alliance, for example, constituency is young people, right? The young people that we work with. So it's the demographic that your organization works with. So for cult fitness, it's basically anybody who wants to exercise, So, okay, children, youth, women, youth, young people and children, okay? Great. Give me more. What are some of the other constituencies that you work for? Underprivileged children and women, okay? Youth and women, great, thank you. And feel free to take a wide shot. That, sometimes it's an obvious demographic, that the one that goes into your donor proposals and reports, but you really believe that, wait a minute, I think our constituency is this, right? So feel free to say that. Okay, youth, children, parents, teachers, yes, Jagdish, actually the whole spectrum. Youth, school, college dropouts, okay, thank you, Anand. Government schools, community college students, youths and dropout, okay, great, awesome. And I want you to keep this word in mind, constituency, yeah, because without them, we are nothing. Our work means nothing, right? So I like to try and look at who is the constituency of cult fitness, and now everybody would say their constituency or primary target demographic is anybody who wants to exercise, but my argument is no, their primary constituency is the trainers of fitness, actually. Because if you look at India, one is generally trainers for sportsmen and athletes. It's a very niche, very small demographic. So when a fitness company grows so rapidly, they actually couldn't find qualified, certified fitness instructors. So I believe that their primary demographic was trainers and building more and more fitness trainers. These are just some of the great examples of the kind of employment opportunities that cult fitness created. It took some of the most underemployed or unemployed athletes from across India, trained them, certified them, and gave them a more regular, flexible source of income. as they became an instructor. And this is a great story. Actually, if you go to Instagram after this call and follow Rishabh Tilang, he actually has a video, and it is a story of how he went across India looking for unemployed and underemployed athletes and sportsperson so that he can build on their passion and leverage it for cult fitness, so that they can find not just skilled, passionate instructors, but really people who are driven. They just love the concept of kinesthetic movements and physical fitness. So cult actually ended up attracting a lot of such hidden talent across the country. By the end of January 2020, there were 5,000 full-time instructors as employees who worked on fixed or variable pays. They also launched their own certification course called the Cult Training Academy. And if you notice, interestingly, they are not just training their trainers on how to do a boxing session or how to do a yoga session. They actually train their trainers on communicative English, customer relationships, leadership, time management, safety standards, right? So in many ways, there are a lot of life skills related courses that Cult Training Academy adopted, which for me means they really understood that a trainer is not just about their domain expertise, but a trainer is an individual and therefore needs to be empowered and equipped in more than one ways beyond technical transactions, to be able to do what they do really well. They basically created benchmarks and practices which actually never existed in India. And that's how an organization, in many ways a startup actually, and the beauty of a startup or an enterprise is that it actually creates a certain job which did not exist formally in the market. Can you think of other startups in India that created jobs that did not exist maybe 5 years back? Can you put that on the chat too? That would be great. The question is, can you think of startups that ended up creating jobs now, which did not exist 5 years from now? Great, Jagdish, Swiggy, absolutely. That's a great example. Ola, all right, great. Great, give me more. Urban Clap, absolutely. Yeah, I'm also an Urban Clap user and love them. Uber, yeah, great. Give me more. Swiggy, Zomato. Okay. If you're in the space of youth employability, I'd like you to stay with that thought of what are some startups that created jobs that did not exist 5 years back? Yeah, because it can be a very useful, insightful thing for you. Yeah, Paytm, Amazon, the very idea of online shopping. Absolutely. Great, great, great. Awesome. I'm going to move ahead with that. Awesome. Great. Thank you. So stay with that thought also, that when startups create jobs that didn't exist formally, what does it mean for the country, right? And in this context, Cult Fitness is not even a civil society space. It is really a for-profit enterprise started, but they actually did go to the extent of creating new jobs for athletes and sports persons. And, when we look at the very idea of culture of an organization, we often think, or we directly equate cultures of an organization to values, or the human aspects of it. But culture of an organization is often a lot more than that. It is about its rituals and rhythms and practices and processes and structures and so on and so forth. So I'll also, at some point, you will be thinking about what really are the different components for your own organization in that process. One of their values is no same old, same old. So if you are a Cult Fitness member, you'll never get bored, because just the amount of formats they offer to their customers is so amazing. You'll never get bored, basically. You'll never want to go to another gym, right? And it's a great strategy. Very quick question for all of you. what is an average age of a cult member? I mean, of course, I'm one of those extreme examples perhaps, but what do you think is like the age group of most people who take a cult fitness membership? Very curious. The right answer is young, of course. Going by my own story. Okay, 28. Okay, great, Angela. Thank you. Maybe 35. Okay. Yeah. 20 to 40. Great. Okay. Yeah. So let's stay with what Bindya has suggested. You know, pretty much Angela, Mary, everybody's in that whole spectrum. It's actually within the age group of 40. So if, you know, we're really talking to a certain demographic, that gets excited. And if you notice in the previous slide, you know, they have versions and of exercise formats which are actually conceptualized by Hrithik Roshan and Tiger Shroff and stuff like that, right? I was never too excited about it, but the fact is they're talking to a very young demographic. And I like to believe in the last 5 years of cult fitness, they did two very important things. One is to create employment for athletes and sports person. Two, they got a lot of young urban India to start exercising. You know, it's something that I never did before, you know, 3 years. Of course, there is a very important layer of the fact that fitness is not necessarily inclusive. You know, there's a big layer of privilege involved in it. You need to have time to exercise, you need to have money to exercise, you need to have support systems at home to exercise. Also, you know, somebody like me who perhaps has no physical disabilities can exercise. So there's a very big layer of power and privilege even within the fitness spectrum actually, but we'll talk about that in a bit. If you go to any cult fitness center, doesn't matter Delhi or Bangalore, they all look the same, they all feel the same, they all do the same, they all say the same things. You know, some of the things that really I liked about them, one of their values is blow away customer expectations. And I don't know if you know this, but when the Me Too movement happened, and everybody was busy trying to constitute POSH and ICC within their organizations, cult fitness actually took some really great steps to address the issue of harassment or inappropriate touch. For example, what you see in front of you, you know, is a sticker that you get to take and place it next to your yoga mat, because then that's your way of telling your instructor if you want to be touched or not touched, right? So some really, you know, and they were always ahead of the game, even before the world can figure out. They moved at a certain kind of speed that as a customer, you were always like, oh, wow, you actually thought about this. I don't know if you know this, but, you know, the day Section 377 was decriminalized, a lot of their instructors, in the spirit of solidarity to the LGBTQI movement, actually wore the opposite gender clothing and they came to work out. So one of my fitness instructors actually wore bangles and a bindi and showed up to his class. And it was really a way of, you know, saying everyone is welcome here. And again, remember, they're speaking to a certain demographic here. Over a period of time, Cult Fit also started something called Cure Fit, which means they added food, you know, they added fitness, they added healthy groceries, they added mental wellness and therapy, and eventually they started medical care also. So, you know, a business actually started very small and it expanded. In many ways, I can relate it to Quest Alliance's journey, right? You start with one program, and then over a period of time, you build several programs, you build several products to keep engaging with the same demographic. If you have a story like that for your own organization, where let's say you started with one demographic, one program, one region, but over a period of years, you see that, you know, you begin to grow, you begin to expand, and that's pretty much what Cult Fit also did. What they took is what Quest Alliance calls an ecosystem approach, which means anybody who's in that age group of 20 to 40 is excited about working out, how many ways can we keep them engaged with us so that their fitness goals are actually met? And it's also a great business strategy. So they really took this ecosystem approach. They built their own app. So a lot of it is, their technology. It's awesome. You're more than welcome to download it after that. They really should give me some shares, I think. But anyway, I will leave that. If you notice, Cult Fitness does not call themselves a fitness or a gym at all. They actually call themselves personal health advisors, because they kind of cover the entire spectrum of fitness. I'd like you to pay attention to the messaging and the way they're communicating to their audience in this whole process. And therefore, they ended up creating a lot of other kinds of jobs, which was not just fitness instructors, but those in delivery services, chefs, housekeeping. They just ended up creating multiple kinds of jobs. And by the end of their first 3 years, they had over 6 lakh active users in the country. And they didn't just stay in India, they actually expanded to Dubai and were very soon going to Southeast Asia, West Asia, Europe, and North America. Quiz time. What is Cult Fit? Is it a user acquisition channel for CureFit, which is their bigger ecosystem business? I've already answered that for you. But I'd like you to think of that, right? We started this story, which was about a fitness center. But at some point, that fitness center grew in its vision and became, a tech platform for anybody who is interested in health and fitness related areas. These are just some headlines from 2019-20. I'll give you a chance to read it before I go to the next. Just spend 1 minute just reading it. So you can see 25 million customers, 800 centers, 50 cities, $100 million in their annual revenue. They attracted, they were really targeting for another 10 to 15 million customers. So at this point, I have a quiz question for all of you, and I'd like you to put it on the chat box. At this point, and this is approximately 5-6 months back, was Cult Fitness profitable? Yes, no, or don't know. You can put it on the chat. Was Cult Fitness at this point a profitable company with all of this data that you're seeing on the screen? Okay, Rajesh says yes. Yes, yes, yes. Himani says maybe break even. All right. Not sure. Augustine says maybe. Sounds like that. Okay. Okay, great. I'll give you the big answer then and kill the suspense. They were not yet profitable because their operation costs were so high that even though they were expanding and they were, acquiring millions in investment from investors and, all of that, they were still not profitable as an organization, even up to January 2020. Well, which of this, if you were to now define, is CureFit, 1, a health and fitness company, 2, a medical company, 3, a healthcare data company, which one do you think is the closest to their identity? 1, 2, or 3? Okay, a lot of people are saying 1. Great. Augustine says 3. Interesting. 3. Okay, Mary. A healthcare data company. Great. Okay. Bindya says 3. Anand says 1. Manisha says 3. Mani says 3. Okay. A lot of 3s. Great, great, great. Great. So I think you're kind of picking up on the vibe that I'm trying to send across. I actually personally also believe, so one is there is no accurate answer here. It's a very biased quiz because I'm trying to push my agenda on it. I mean, if you ask CureFit, they will say we are a health and fitness company. But if you really ask me, they have so much data about Shalini Menon and what kind of classes she enrolls, what does she buy, what does she eat. I really think that Cult Fitness knows everything that I think about fitness by now. This is something that you're going to look at a lot more in detail in the subsequent 2 webinars. So I'm not going into the details of it, but you will see that for any organization, and think about it for your own organizations, there is a very strong internal, external communication framework. So one is, how do you talk to people outside, but also how do you talk to people inside, which are your employees, right? And we'll look at that in subsequent webinars in a lot more detail. There are some chat messages coming. I want to make sure that I read them. They tend to overlook data. Yeah, absolutely, Razu. And that's my next slide. Amazing. And I think, if you really ask me what is the what was the biggest strength? The biggest strength was not that they had great gyms or they had different exercise formats. The biggest strength was that they knew their game on data. And this is actually their framework for data infrastructure. It's taken from one of their blogs. And when we think of gyms, for example, or fitness centers, we never think of hiring data scientists and machine learning engineers. But CureFit actually has data scientists and machine learning engineers, a lot of them actually within the business model, because they know that's where the money is. And their platform is so cool that it knows exactly what Shalini is doing, eating, watching, buying. Now you'll say, yeah, but that's pretty much what Facebook does or Amazon does. It's true. But I want you to think that this is not an idea that generated in the Silicon Valley or Palo Alto outside. It is something that grew up in Bangalore between two young boys who just love Muay Thai, and that's about it, right? So I'd like you to think of how, as a leader, you could be really passionate about something, but as that passion turns into an idea, into a model, how many different kinds of strengths and skills do you have to leverage to be able to really turn it into something, right? I'm not going into too much of details here, but Cult really has a way of combining technology and behavior science together. So they'll try and understand what does Shalini use, what Shalini does not eat, and they will also try to reward me. So sometimes they'll give me these illusionary fit cash and ask me to spend it, which I never do. And but when you keep accumulating it, what do? You have to spend it back on the business, because fit cash is an illusion. It doesn't really exist, right? So they really play on behavior science and technology together with their constituency and keep you so involved in that whole process. I'm going to jump it. We've already covered it. They speak to young people. So they have the language, so if you look at their language, if you look at their centers, they're all designed for excitement. They're designed for adrenaline rush, be better every day. That's their punchline. And all of their classes are fun. Okay, let me actually stop there and ask Himani very quickly. Himani, you spoke about how you love them, right? Do you want to unmute yourself very quickly and talk about why you love them?
I think building on the same lines, and I also keep advocating for them. I think when it comes to fitness, one of the things that they've really tried to solve is breaking the monotony. Like traditionally, when you used to think of gym, personally, me, I was like, I am bored. Like you keep doing the same thing every time, right? So they've just like hit the nail right and hit the right problem just by breaking the monotony, and the diversity that they offer, that you don't get bored, is something that they you really enjoy. And it's just not limited to high-end regimes, but like if I am like it is a gloomy day, I'll just open the MindFit app and there are like tons of meditations that you can browse to. I want to do a yoga on a particular day and there are tons of options. I think it's just the diversity and a lot of exciting options that you can browse through.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Imani. I thought I should just get somebody else to talk about it instead of me. We are not going to do this. You already covered it. This is an important story. And if you notice, the most important part of the screen is the date. Why do you think it is an important part of the story? March 22nd, 2020. What had happened around the time when Cult Fitness actually got 832 crores of funding?
Lockdown started.
Yes, absolutely. The lockdown happened, right? So imagine March 22nd, you get 800 odd crores, and then the lockdown happens. What does it mean to an organization? And that's what we're going to look at. When COVID happened, the natural response, perhaps like most of our organizations, was to go online, right? So they went online with their classes, with their sessions, with their doctor consultation, everything moved online. But does the story really have a happy ending? I think that's what we want to look at. Here's an important piece of article. So remember, 22nd of March, they got 800 odd crores. The lockdown happened. And on 4th of May, they actually fired thousands of their employees. Most of them are trainers. They fired, it's out in news. And unfortunately, 10% of the employees are fired on the 1st of May, Labor Day. So they were not really thinking, right? Perhaps they were generally overwhelmed because of the lockdown, or maybe organizations are not really sensitive about some of these things. We don't know, right? But they actually fired employees on the 1st of May, Labor Day. And well, that's a great, pot of biryani by itself, because you can cook it, and the media did cook it quite a bit. And it was a big mistake for them, because remember, trainers were their primary constituency. They created employment for athletes and sports persons. And when things got bad, their first strategy was to actually fire the same people. So employees didn't keep quiet. They decided to fight back. And they went to change.org and they filed this petition. And they said, it's okay, fire us, but we'd like you to give us 6 months of pay and some insurance. And this is done by one of their fitness instructors. And a lot of things happen. If you look at the left, and I'll give you a few minutes to read it. If you look at the left, people are criticizing Cult Fitness now. On the right is Rishabh Telang giving a formal explanation of why this decision was made. But I'd like you to just stay with this for 30 seconds and I'll move forward. So very simply put, the pandemic actually affected almost everybody around us, right? But how does one respond to one's employees is a larger reflection of the org level culture and its own values. But at the same time, one can argue, well, it's a good business strategy. The gyms are not operational, so the instructors are not working. So, we say bye to them for some time. And then they did a lot of, firefighting. They started talking about how they stand by their trainers and, and how they're giving online opportunities to them. But it was kind of a little late by then already. The good news is on 23rd May 2020, the change.org petition won because CureFit finally agreed to give them 6 months of compensation and insurance. And if you look at the 43,000 people who signed this petition demanding CureFit to pay attention to their employees, it was essentially signed by people like me, users like me, because their instructors were largely the reason why some of us actually went there, because they kept things happy, they kept things safe, and some of us were really irritated and angry. I'd like you to think of power now in the story, right? The power with which the organization took certain decisions, and that one of those powers was definitely financial power. But also then think of the employees who didn't have financial power, perhaps came from tier 2 towns and villages of India, perhaps not even speaking primarily in English, but how did they take back their power? So I'd like you to stay with some of these thoughts. Not going into the details of it. This is something that we will be looking at it a lot. But in the story, you will find these 5-6 layers of everything that happens inside an organization. There is the self, which is you and me. There is the team. There is the organization. There is the constituency. There is the largest stakeholders. In this case, there are also shareholders. And then there are local global trends that can affect all of us, right? So I'd like you to stay with this, and I'm kind of done. I'm going to stop here. Maybe we'll take about 2 odd questions, and then I'll hand this back to Arundhati. Great. Any comments, questions, reactions? Sorry, my laptop is giving me all kinds of strange notifications at the wrong time. But okay, so maybe one question I'll ask you. If you were to connect the dots between the cult story and you as a civil society member, like what is that one thing that struck you the most? Yeah. What is that one thing that struck you the most in the story? And when I say struck, I mean to say surprise you, or maybe you already knew and it validated it. You can put it on the chat, or you can unmute yourself and say it. We'll wait for some time. Mani says values. Mani, say a little bit more. That would be great. What about values?
I mean, like, it just felt like I always used to talk about it in terms of business model. Like, they have a good business model, but behind getting the right business model, I think the values they attach to it, just keeping the, what do you call, the people at the core, and the values that they've defined for themselves, and just staying true to that. And somehow it just gets reminded me of Quest's way of working. Like, so it's just like now I could connect the dots that how we do everything, keeping our values intact. So same way they had a certain organizational values which they stayed true to, despite COVID, non-COVID, and that's something that stayed. So behind that business that they were trying to do to scale and everything, those values were the things that really mattered.
Sure. Thanks, Ivani. And something you want to take off from what?
Yeah, for me, I believe.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry if I'm cutting.
No. Please do it.
Right. So, see, what I've observed from this particular case scenario is maybe there was not too much of situational awareness as far as the company is concerned. I mean, like they had all the components, all the ingredients of making a very successful company or an organization. But as Himani has rightly pointed out, maybe the values were not in place, or maybe if they were in place also, they didn't adhere to it. And in your slide you have mentioned they had like it's not just their company who may have been like receiving funds or anything as such before the COVID, but many organizations I can point out from this particular scenario would be maybe there was not much situational awareness as far as the formation of the companies.
Sure.
Concern. Other than that, so that's my opinion.
Sure. Thanks, Razu. So again, it's something that Razu spoke about, something that Himani also spoke about. So the values are always there, but do we actually practice it, right? And I personally like to believe that practicing values in good times is easy, but it is really practicing them in a place of crisis where the true test of an organization actually stands, right? And I'd like you to also stay critical of your own organizations and your own context, right? Does Quest Alliance practice its values every single time? Just stay with that thought, okay? And I'm not asking you to think of it in the context of, did we make a mistake or no? It is a genuine challenge in the life of an organization and an entrepreneur that sometimes to live the values with your constituencies, with your employees, can genuinely be something that you can't do, right? We may be interested in dismantling power outside, but maybe we struggle with it inside, right? And we all know about this. So I'd like you to stay critical about this question for your own organizations and not be 100% complimentary and say, but unlike us, right? Stay with that question. Jagdish, do you want to say something?
No, my take was the one big issue with these kind of startups is they go with the concept of exponential growth or quick growth without thinking about the support system they have to build to reach that stage. When these kind of unexpected things happens, they just collapse because they don't have a support system to hold when things go out of control. The same thing happened with Coffee Day also. It was such a successful model, but we know what happened to the founder of Siddharth. Because they believe in this exponential growth and go on with such a spree that the scaffolding is not strong and it just collapses in one day.
Sure.
Exponential growth in short time is not a good model, is my personal opinion.
Okay, sure. Great. Okay. I'm going to read two comments. Anand says about nurturing ideas. Bindya says there are organization challenges. Great. I'm going to hand this over to Arundhati because this is going to be a very elaborate conversation over even the next two webinars. But the important piece as an emerging leader is the answer we are looking for is not the one that is right or that is the one that is wrong, but really looking at why do certain things happen in a certain way in a certain organization, right? And remove judgment from it. So we're not looking at, because in maths there could be a right and wrong, right? 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. So if I say 2 plus 2 is equal to 5, it's wrong, right? But in lived realities of an organization and leaders across the world, it sometimes isn't as straightforward. And so we want to stay curious about it, right? So stay curious about the whole thing. Going to hand us over to the next story, which is from a completely opposite spectrum. So Arundhati, sorry, I took a lot more time than that was actually allotted to me, but over to you.
No, I think I think you brought up some very, very important questions that we are going to stay with for the next quite a while. So I think this sort of frames the next few webinars very well. And I think I'm going to also sort of play off of that a little bit. But yeah, so sort of in complete contrast to what Shalini is talking about, I'm going to talk about ANANDI. How many of you know about ANANDI? Have any of you heard about ANANDI at all? I would doubt it, but if in case there is, Rupa's heard about ANANDI. Anybody else? Okay. If yes, oh, you have. Okay, Manisha has heard about ANANDI. Okay, great. So, what do? It's a civil society organization. It's an NGO based in Gujarat, and that's sort of that is what you need to know to get into the story. But I think I'm going to start showing. One second. Yeah. So can everyone see? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So yeah, so we are going to start with a very, very simple story. It's a story of 4 women. Okay, 4 women got together. They were all working in Mahila Samakhya at the time. Do you know Mahila Samakhya? Does anybody has heard of Mahila Samakhya? Just type in the chat box to all your answers to whatever I'm saying. Has anybody heard of Mahila Samakhya? Anybody know about Mahila Samakhya? Okay. Okay, no. People have not heard of Mahila Samakhya. Okay, Mahila Samakhya basically was a very, okay, Manisha knows about Mahila Samakhya. Manisha, you want to tell us what you know about Mahila Samakhya?
Actually, long back, we were linked with ANANDI also for the self-help group in Gujarat. But I have linked with them and worked with them, but not so. I remained in Gujarat for 5 years. So I may be not able to tell in detail, but I had good experience with them.
Okay, great. So basically, Mahila Samakhya was the first of its kind, right? I mean, we always, when we talk about civil society organizations and NGOs, we say ki matlab NGOs will do chota kaam, even if they do it on a big scale, they're essentially providing a foil to actual running government programs, right? Government is the big implementer, bade scale pe on a huge platform, huge scale. Whoever is doing it is the government, right? NGOs will provide like either a mirror to the government, or they will provide what else the government should be doing, etc. But Mahila Samakhya was the first of its kind where the government decided that it wanted to do something about women's empowerment. So very important, the climate in which Anandi was born was the climate in which for the first time globally there was a discussion about this idea of empowerment, right? This idea that power needs to go into the hands of certain people. And I mean, the word empowerment had been around for a while, but in the development world, it had just started sort of taking off. What does empowerment really mean? How would it, interact with different people, etc., etc. And like Manisha has said in the chat, it essentially, Mahila Samakhya was like the government taking over this idea of, okay, how do we do women's empowerment through running different smaller groups of women, collectives of women, through SHGs, yes, through microfinance, yes, but essentially with the objective to empower, not with the objective to create jobs or to do other things, right? So the intent was very important. So when there were these self-help groups, then there were all of these other things happening within Mahila Samakhya. There were these 4 women, Janvi, Neeta, Sejal, and Sumitra. 4 of them worked in this organization in Mahila Samakhya in Gujarat. And at that time, all 4 of them were a little disillusioned with what Mahila Samakhya's stated value versus its practiced value. What Shalini was also saying, that sometimes you state some value, but what you actually end up practicing is very different. So they were all a little disillusioned by what was the stated value of, what is the actual practice value of Mahila Samakhya in Gujarat. For many years, it had run with a very robust, wonderful system where women had been empowered, that stayed at the heart of the empowerment. But in around the 1994, 1995, they all got together and they said, but something is really off in how Mahila Samakhya is going about doing this. If we want to work with women, and if we want to work with women who come from really marginalized backgrounds, and we want to build the livelihoods of women cannot just be unko job de do, unko education de do. It has to be dignity, it has to be equality, it has to be a good holistic life, it has to be opportunity, right? So if all of these things come together, and it has to be justice, right? So if all of these things come together, then it is truly a livelihood of a woman. So it is not just you collect money in a self-help group and you get back money, but what does it really mean? So then they set out to form ANANDI. ANANDI is an acronym. It stands for Area Networking and Development Initiatives, but essentially ANANDI also means joy in Gujarati, right? So it was an organization that was founded with this idea that there has to be joy. So okay, so now the way I'm going to tell this story is in a sort of deconstructed manner. I'm not going to tell you a whole story as a story, but give you with at every point sort of leave you with questions just to think, okay, about organizations and what Shalini was saying about taking a critical eye to how we think about organizations, right? So so what are the entry points? I've already told you that this started in 1995. So it's been 25 years. We're in the 26th year of ANANDI. So it's a YOLD organization. Has anybody heard the term YOLD? Does anybody know what YOLD means? What YOLD could mean? Just type it in the chat. No, not years old. It's a YOLD organization. Think of it. It's entered its 25th year. So what could YOLD mean? It's clearly like two words meshed together. But what are those two words? No? No one? Shalini knows. Yeah, Shalini, go ahead. Young, yes, Rajesh. Past, old. Yes, Rajesh, young and old. Correct. Very good. So yeah, it's a young and old organization. There is something about it that is extremely look young and old. Well, yeah, it's 25 years old. So in many different contexts, this organization is old, right? In the sense that its founders have been around for 25 years. 25 years is a really long time for any organization, any civil society organization to be alive. The very fact that it has seen 2.5 decades of changes in everyday life. So there is an aspect of being old, but at the same time, there is a youth to the organization in the sense that more than 65% of people in the organization are below 30. So its demographic is incredibly young. So its fabric is incredibly young. Its legacy is incredibly old. And when those two things come together, there has to be conflict, right? When the young and the old come together, there has to be a sense of real coming together of worlds and maybe a clashing of worlds. So okay, so whenever we enter any organization, okay, and I want you to think of your own organizations also when I'm saying this, but there are usually 2 or 3 things that sort of form the absolute basis of what that organization is, or what you think of as the entry point to that organization. What is this organization really about? And I think, in my opinion, in my very individual opinion, there are 3 things that are ANANDI's sort of tethers. There's the main entry points into ANANDI. When you come into ANANDI, you know about ANANDI. These are the 3 things that you would know about, right? One is the origin story. Okay, so what is the origin story? An origin story is essentially, in this case, what I told you. 4 women or 5 women at one. There's different versions of the story, but 4 or 5 women got together, very opinionated, feminists, frustrated with the work happening around women's rights in Gujarat, were extremely footloose, were based in 4 different areas, had all sorts of different ideas about what to do, but came together, said, we together need to do something about what is happening to women in Gujarat, and therefore try to influence what is happening in general, right? So that is the origin story. with that came this idea that two of them said, "Nahi, we want to work with Adivasi populations." So we come to who are the emotional tethers of this story, right? Who are the people we want to work with? The constituency, what Shalini has been talking about. So what is the constituency in this story? So they said, "Nahi." Two people said, we want to work with Adivasi populations. There is on the border of eastern border of Gujarat is a whole Adivasi belt, so we want to work there. Two other people said no. The coastal regions of Gujarat are far more feudal, far more sort of patriarchal, extremely oppressive to women. So while Adivasis may be more poor and more marginalized, but here the women are more oppressed. And so they said, no, but we want to work across the spectrum. We're not just working for women, we're working for the most disadvantaged women. So we want to work in Adivasi areas, we want to work with other different kinds of marginalizations. So they decided, no, we don't have to choose. We will work in all of these areas. So they started working on the tribal belt also. They started working on the coast also. So that is the origin story that greets you when you come to ANANDI, right? And every organization has an origin story. Every organization has history. Every organization has these famous watershed moments. Wo light hui, this one time that I got this thought, these four women, there was this one meeting when they met and something came to their minds. There is always one origin story. So when you think about origin stories, when you think about history, what are the questions that come to my mind? One question is always, and this also comes with the old conversation, why do the young and the old clash? Do origin stories empower or burden? Do we carry it as, oh my God, this is so inspiring, I'm going to, this is how, like every day I want to put it on my bathroom and I read it every day and I feel inspired by it, and I go out into the world and say, okay, I'm also a woman and I also can do this, etc., etc. But at the same time, it can feel like, oh, but they took so many risks, they did this, they did that, hum to kuch bhi nahi kar rahe, we're not doing anything that compares to that, we are not able to do that. Or now that they have done it like that, do we have to do it like that only, right? So does history empower or burden, right? That's one. The other question is, does history become a default template for how the organization must always see itself? So is that the blueprint that they have laid out, ki matlab these 5 women, this is how they worked like this only, this is how they always worked? Does that become, this is ANANDI, right? It's not written down. Yesterday we saw it in the deep structures, right? Informal spaces mein se formal rules bane, right? So when out of informal spaces emerge formal rules, what happens is, okay, in some space, some unstated world, this is how we are supposed to do it. It might not be written down, but it's passed down through verbal tradition, through oral histories, ki, oh, this is how ANANDI always used to do it, so this is how it always happens. We are like this only. This is how it's always done in this organization. It might not be written anywhere, but this is how it's always done. Is that how history is treated? Or is it treated as, oh, there's this fantastic story of risk-taking and, feminist icons and dynamism, and with every generation of new, younger feminists, they'll reinvent the wheel and take it in new directions. I just wanted to stay with this story. Right? So that's the first entry point. The second entry point is, like Shalini said, the constituency. Who is the constituency of ANANDI? They had that big fight. They decided, okay, we will work on the tribal belt also. We will work on the coast also, right? And we will do this. And so they very clearly defined their constituency. They said marginalized, tribal, Dalit, Muslim, and women. Now, it doesn't have to be women directly, but indirectly, we have to be in some way contributing to gender agendas nationally, right? Okay, so so now we've thought of this. Now, when you think of a community-led agenda setting, right? So this idea of not just what is the constituency, hum kiske saath kaam kar rahe hain, who are we working with is not just the question, but how are we engaging with them, right? Who is our constituency? How are we engaging with them? Are we engaging? Are we way that we are the doers and you are the recipients? Or we are, you are our partners and we think of it. So very clearly from the beginning, ANANDI had decided it is a community-led agenda setting. So they decided that it has to be groups of women have to form, collectives of women have to form. After collectives form, then only we can do. So the way ANANDI essentially works is in each of the areas, there is a women sangathan, a political women sangathan, not just an SHG groups. They come together with this explicit sort of agenda to set an agenda on what changes need to happen in society. So they are a very political women's collectives in each of these 4 districts where ANANDI works, and each of those 4 districts ke women's collectives then inform what change agendas ANANDI ultimately sets. Okay. Okay. So bye Shalini. So then so yeah, so each of these collectives sets these agendas. After they set the agendas, ANANDI decides these are okay. So this is what the grassroots change making is needed. Okay, we will go and find the funding for this. Let's go and find something else for this. Let's go and find, right? So ANANDI essentially acts like a partner, an equal partner. And so when we go back to power, okay, empowerment, power, disempowerment, how do we think about power in ways where it is empowering to the constituency? Empowering meaning they feel power in themselves. They feel power in their own ideas. They feel power in their own actions. It is not guided by someone. If tomorrow ANANDI leaves, they feel confident to continue. These are all very important approaches that ANANDI took to this process. So, I mean, I'm not going to get into the timeline and the map, but essentially, so it was the constituencies were all defined by, these are all disaster-ridden constituencies. So always facing droughts or floods, but even before that there were riots and the earthquake and all of that. And so so it's a very disaster prone community. And so what comes out of what is a constituency born out of disaster? And these are the 4 sort of districts where it is based. It is based in Dahod, Panchmahal, Morbi, and Bhavnagar, right? And so then what are the questions that you're left with in terms of constituency? So how does the organization see itself? What is the relationship that it has? Is there an exit plan, right? Does the organization see itself as we are here forever? We are here for good. We are placing ourselves either, we are constructing a cement house here and we are never moving? Or does the organization see itself as an enabler, an empowerer, and then somebody who will eventually need to move away? And this is a very interesting question for most organizations. Are we thinking of ways in which to expand all the time? Or are we also thinking of ways in which to shrink so that, because empowerment is also shrinking yourself so that somebody else can get that power? So these are all questions that you're left with. And also, we're in an organization. Now imagine you're working with these very marginalized communities in the villages, right? When you're working with all these marginalized communities, but you're running these massive projects. So there are team members who come from very privileged backgrounds, English speaking colleges, have all sorts of technical and computer know-how, people like me, right, who have had the privilege of an extremely upper class upbringing, who then get injected into these field areas, and because there are these existing large collectives and existing team members who are born out of these contexts, who are tribal, Dalit, Adivasi, themselves know what this is, have been with Anandi from the beginning, there is a tussle, right? Who gets the power? Who has power? Some people have power of history. Some people have power of technology. Some people have power of knowledge. Some people have power of experience. How does this come together into how does then the organization deal with what we call homegrown, which is they're a part of Anandi's fabric and are a part of that area, and imported people have been brought from the outside and sort of injected into that space. How does Anandi define these things, or how does any organization define these things? These are also interesting questions. Now, sorry, I don't know this. So essentially we are left, we kind of go back to so the emotional tethers are the constituency, the origin story is the history, but as Himani was saying about cult fit, a very important aspect of the history coming together with the constituency is, in what way are we really going to do this? Like, right, whatever we do, how are we going to do it? That is defined by the values. And so the values are dignity, social justice, equality, peace. These are the stated values of Anandi, right? Accountability, transparency at all times, all stages, women's rights as human rights, collective action and sustainable communities, right? So I already told you about collective action and sustainable communities, why it's important to work in ways that the change that you bring about is sustainable. So these are all things that Anandi is constantly talking about doing, right? Within values, I think the questions are between stated and lived, between perceived and actual. Do values change over time? Can some values be contextual? Are they, for example, right now there is a drought going on. During the drought, are values slightly different? Can they change once once we get out of that? These are all ways in which to think about values. I'm going to stop at this point just here and ask you, is there when you think about the history of your organization, what is a word that comes to your mind? What is sort of the first word that comes to your mind when you think about the history of your organization, of whichever organization you're a part of? The history or the entry point, okay? It doesn't have to be the history. It just, what is the entry point to your organization? If I was to think about your organization, what is one word or a couple of words that I would think of when I think about your organization? Synergy, empower, okay. These are great words. Others? What are entry points? What are the first entry points? What does somebody know about your organization sort of as soon as they hear about it? Connecting to empower, okay. Technology, a team of better society, okay. Youth empowerment, future ready. And you're all from the same organization, let me remind. A lot of you are from the same organization, some of you are from different organizations, but so many people have very different ideas of what the entry point is. Great. Empower, success. Okay, success. Himani, do you want to little bit expand on that?
So I think when I was like now recalling about the entry point of our organization, just seeing the fact that it started so small, And now, not just the fact of scaling, but now that we are able to help or empower or enable so many more people in the in a decade's time, I think just feels like a success.
Okay.
So starting very small and then just like seeing that we are able to impact so many lives by the end of 10, 12 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. So one of the entry points to your organization is probably the idea of it in itself being a success, right? The idea that this is a successful experiment, right? Okay. Yeah. So so it doesn't have to be history or constituency or values. It could be communication or branding or its value of itself, what value it holds for itself. All interesting. Self-employment. Yes. Okay. So great. So I think interesting points, all of them. And I think somewhere or the other, I think we are going to stay with all of these different issues when we come to the next couple of webinars. For the next two webinars, we're going to spend a whole lot of time just deconstructing our organizations. So I want you to sort of stay with some of these questions. These are all important questions. So, but once you've sort of had the scaffolding, as I think Jagdish had put it, once you have sort of the structure, the pillars around which you've sort of built the organization, you also need to have some architecture. What are the different playing parts? What are the different moving parts of an organization? One big part of ANANDI, as I already said in the previous thing, are partnerships. So how does it see its partnerships? How does it see its different relationships with its stakeholders, with its constituency, etc. So so a big part of ANANDI are its the partnerships are with sangathans, with networks, with movements, with academia, constantly engaging with this idea of what does empowerment mean for women, for marginalized communities, and to stay with that and to constantly experiment around that. The other one is learning, and I think maybe this would be an entry point for Quest Alliance, but for ANANDI, this is an architecture, right? Reflexivity, multiplicity of truth. How do we understand? How are we learning? Right? How are we constantly learning? A big part of learning in ANANDI is participatory action learning. So you're constantly, with whatever constituency you're a part of, the big sort of value is that almost every employee of ANANDI carries is that there is already knowledge embedded in any constituency that you go to. They already know. How do we help us learn better able to advocate to the government or to advocate to community or to advocate to different gatekeepers in society, right? This is the inherent sort of premise on which learning is based. So participatory action learning is basically you go into communities and you basically learn. You don't do research, you don't cull out information and keep it with you. You generate knowledge about what is happening with that community, ideas about that community with the community itself, and in the process you also learn, they also learn, and everybody learns together. So that participatory learning is a very important part of ANANDI. And then power. I can't think of a feminist organization that cannot have its basis in power, because a power is sort of where I don't know how many of you have in some ways theoretically heard about feminism, learned about feminism, but this idea of the personal being the political, this idea that whatever happens in our inner lives is as political as what is happening outside, and therefore we always have to counter the powers that be. And so powers is a very important part of what ANANDI is. So this is sort of the architecture, right? So this is the sort of other parts in an organization, the moving parts of an organization. So I'd like you all to think of what in your own organizations do you think are sort of moving parts? Like there are the pillars of what the organization is, and then there are things on top that you're constructing, right? There are ways in which you're functioning, processes that you're constructing. That's the architecture. And so the questions are we able to deal with deep structures, as we spoke about yesterday? Does action feed learning, or does learning feed action? And this is a very interesting question. I think it would be very interesting I would be very interested to know, if you want to answer this, do you think action feeds learning in your organization, or does learning feed action in your organization? What do you think? Do you get the question? That you learn by doing, or you do after learning? Primarily, I mean, of course, we all do both, but primarily, what does your organization believe in? What do you think? You learn by doing, or you do after learning?
After action feedback.
Sorry?
We do when action happens, from that we will be learning.
Okay, so you learn from action. Okay. Both. Okay, both learning and doing. Okay, learn by doing. Okay. So I think, and in the same organization, it might be different for different levels, or for different programs, or for different things. I'm saying it's very different for different. Historically, more learning by doing, but it has grown to be a better balance. Okay. Okay. All right. Great. So that's another way of thinking about how we think about learning, right? Because I mean, Quest thinks of itself as a learning organization, has constantly talked about itself being a learning organization. So what does that learning mean? Where does that learning come from? It's not always a binary also. I mean, it's not just learning by doing and doing after learning. Obviously, there is some middle ground. So Sister Mary is saying we started our work after learning, we started doing. Right. Okay. Right. So after, I mean, you learned by doing, and this is what I mean by your organization also, by the way. You start with learning by doing, and then you eventually say, "Nee, 25 saal mein to we have learned everything that we need to know. Now we will do after this learning," right? And that's obviously, that's okay. I mean, that's how things work. But are you also constantly learning? Are you also open to constantly learning by doing? That is also, yeah, you're right. It's constant learning. So yeah, great. And oof. Okay. And the other question vis-a-vis, I think, partnerships is, especially with a feminist organization where we are in partnership with different collectives, essentially you ask, do we formalize this relationship? Do we say, Acha, we are drawing up an MOU between your organization and our organization. This is how we will function, blah, 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 blah. But that feels very, very obtrusive, right? To people, they feel like, you don't trust us, you think we will go back on what we are saying, you think we will not keep to what we are saying, etc. And so a lot of conflict happens in this tussle between the formal and the informal, often. And maybe it's slightly different for your organization. This is just an ANANDI conflict that I'm pointing out, but it's a very interesting sort of space. So this is the architecture. And then there is the outer face, right? Who does the representing of the organization outside the organization? How controlled is the communication and the branding of the organization? ANANDI is not at all controlled. This is our slides are not branded. They don't look the same. Our brochures all look different. Our banners all look different. There's no one branding strategy or communication strategy. But it is controlled in how many people get to go out and speak, right? And how many people get to represent, where you go and represent, how you say what you say about ANANDI. So there is some amount of control about what the impression of ANANDI is to the outside world. So what's the external communication? How do we think about effectiveness, right? Are we an effective organization or not? We don't know. And what is our relationship to the socio-political? So what is happening in the country? Are we constantly interacting with that, responding to that, being an organization that is on the money saying ki, these are things that need to happen, right? So how much of our communication, this is what I meant by hidden power yesterday, right? So how much of our agenda is donor driven, right? Donor communication led. Are we doing certain things because certain donors require it? Are we doing because the sangatans have said they want to do it? And this is not a straight answer every single time. Most of the time you try to say, yes, this is sangathan driven, but so many times it becomes donor driven. And then there is a huge gap between stated and actual value. So I'm giving you an example of what happens when power, right? How we label things, what happens, in what language are we communicating all the time? ANANDI is a completely Gujarati organization. Upar se niche, we are always speaking Gujarati, writing in Gujarati, communicating in Gujarati. But certain ideas only exist in English, and they're not accessible to everyone. And so you often wonder who gets the power of knowledge and information, right? And in what way? And then between action and research, how do we distribute our time, etc. And that's the outer face, right? If we want to put out, say, for example, we want to say that, oh, ANANDI is very effective in everything it does. Are we spending more time trying to convince the world that we are doing a good job, or are we just trying to do the job? And a combination of both has to happen if we want ANANDI to serve as a model for some other people to also learn and get inspired, etc., etc. But that won't happen if we don't do. So it's a very difficult catch-22 that do you commit all your time in doing, or do you commit all your time in research, or how do you balance the two, and how do you put out? So what is in flux? What is always changing? Very few things are always changing. Maybe one is internal communication. How we conduct internal communication is always changing. Now it's WhatsApp. Either earlier it was something else, before that it was something else. Culture is also, I would argue, constantly changing, because if culture is essentially a set of practices that organizations do, then you're constantly relooking at new people coming in saying this is how we do things now, other people coming in saying this is how we do things now. And that's the other conflict in the old method. Approaches also keep changing. We also keep thinking about what are new ways of thinking about empowerment, what are more dynamic ways of thinking about feminism, what are new ways of thinking about power, right? But there are subcultures. So when we get into culture, I think we can think about subcultures, but I think the last question is most important, is who creates the organization, right? Whose organization is this? Is this the organization of constituency? Is it the organization of the people working in it? Is it the organization of the people who founded it? Is it the organization of the current director? Is it, I mean, it's a combination of things. Whose organization is it really? Because ultimately that's where ownership comes and stops. Do you feel like you can make a change? Do you feel like you can affect anything that can really do anything to the organization? And then, of course, there's conflict. In any feminist organization, if you don't lead with conflict, I don't know what you would lead with. But basically, conflict and learning sort of go hand in hand. There is also open, when there is open and honest communication about conflict, it turns into learning. But you also end up spending a lot more time in just conflict management. And that conflict management or avoidance can become a real time suck for anybody who's a part of it, right? So that's one. And I think, yeah, then this question of power, to come back to power, is everybody able to participate in conflict fully? By this question, I mean, it's very easy to say ki, we are an open organization, we confront conflict, we say no, conflict is good. If conflict is there, then only change can come. But is everybody able to participate in conflict equally? Are people able to enter into a conflict and say, okay, I don't agree with this, or this is not okay with me, or is that only reserved for the very top, right? Is that only something that managers do, or coordinators do? Is that something field staff is also able to do? These are all comes back to whose organization is it, and who thinks of it as their own organization. And how does our learning make room for change, right? And I think sort of I've tried to break down Anandi as an organization and give you just different parts of how do we think about an organization as a whole. There are many ways of, I think, thinking about organizations in general. But one of the clearest ways of thinking about it is to break it down and to say, okay, what are all the different parts in this organization, and how do we think about them? We have, I come to the end of my my conversation, presentation, discussion, etc. I think what we should do in the next 20 minutes is sort of just have some reflections on these two stories and what we all thought, some relations, correlations, some questions that are left in our minds, because our next webinar is going to address what we saw in these conversations. So can we sort of have some, do you have some questions about Anandi? Do you have any thoughts about anything else you want to know, or just some thoughts that are going through your mind? Anybody? It's okay for this session to feel a little scattered, by the way. It is meant to be sort of very wide reaching so that we can then tie it up in the next two webinars. So I hope all of you will make it for the next two webinars. But any thoughts, immediate thoughts of what is going through your head, questions, interlinkages, etc. I saw that Angela really liked the first question I asked. So similarly, there are some questions that are staying with you.
Yeah, I think one thing that stuck with me, and that's something I struggle with all the time, is we are there to, bring about a change, and how that change is driven by donor-led, agenda versus what we actually want to do. This is something I'm like in constant.
Yeah.
That's something. I don't know if again, you said it's not a straightforward answer. But I'm still struggling with it.
Yeah. I think this donor-led versus a sort of change-led or community-led or stakeholder-led conversation is always really interesting, because there is no, I mean, it's very difficult to be ideal about it. That you cannot do away with the fact that somebody is giving you money, and if they give you money, there will be some latent or very obvious agenda to that money being given. But I think to have the ability to stop at some point and say, is this so dramatically sort of, what is it being led by? Is there some larger change agenda that we have committed to, and this sort of fits into that, and just smaller things we are doing that are donor led, or are we changing directions completely with I think donor led agendas? And both have happened in the case of Anandi, for example. So I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I only think the constant battle is that how much we understand our stakeholders, or the users. That sort of understanding, because they are not in the system, they're not working, they don't know the ground realities, right? Even if we try to voice out time and again, I think just changing that is hard, because
Yeah,
I know
that,
they operate from a certain power,
Mm.
and they want things a certain way. Matlab, very small example of this should be done by 2 months, okay? Without thinking of the implications of how much time will it require to bring about that change, what is it that our users are asking. So just even going back and voicing out, you can only do it to a limit, because there is there's not that understanding of the ground reality is there. So they operate at their own level, we operate at what, and we are just like, I think, um, in the middle, like where we are trying to fulfill the expectations of the donor, or the business the other stakeholders versus our primary stakeholders. I always feel, at least what usually with my work, is that I'm in the middle and I'm like, what do I do? It's like, if do it within this time, and but this needs more time.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think then that's where the energies questions also goes, is how, are you spending all your energy on convincing somebody what you need to be doing, or are you spending it on actually doing it? And sometimes you are sort of you find that your energies are expended a lot more in just justifying or negotiating, or but yeah, these are that I mean, you got the role of the manager leader role in civil society stuff just because of this, because you're essentially navigating a range of different things. Yeah. Anand, you wanted to go?
Yes, basically, I just wanted to share one thing.
Yeah.
The main thing which was striking me inside long time was also that the moment you shared about so many other the conflicts, the architectures and things. One part is we are empowering our beneficiaries, our constituencies, and the people whom we are working with, and for the people and by the people thing. There is another part which is always striking me. We need to empower even our the donors, our individual donors, our individual sponsors, where there is a need. They also need to know the changes happening across the civil societies, and what really an empowerment means and what really changes are happening. We usually tend to go only the way with the donors and the sponsors, and we try to take their views as the rules for us to change in the organizations. There is something which I also feel in my organization. I always feel we need to empower both ourselves, the beneficiaries whom we are working with, and the sponsors also. Like it tends to relate to them and go back to them, and have a talk with them, views and changes. They can also change their views of the way they are looking as empowerment as. Maybe they are looking at an empowerment as a to work for people, and it is not work for the people. It is working with the people. It's working with the people. So that also is a kind of a change which we need to look at in perspective of with the donors and the sponsors, especially the individual donors. If it's a corporate thing, it's a different kind of situation. But when it comes quite different from corporate thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think I think when we like Shalini was saying about cult fit, one is one is that your constituency is, yes, the people who are using your facility. Your other constituency is the trainers. Similarly, for organizations, I feel like our constituencies are, yes, the communities that we work with, but I think one of our constituencies is also the donor. So you're educating the community. I mean, you're working with the community, educating yourself and sort of empowering, but sort of educating the donor and getting them to understand change in slightly different ways is as important, because otherwise funding patterns will never change. I mean, we'll continue to have people saying ki ye 2 mahine you have to finish this in 2 months, not understanding how change works, long term, sustainable, the kind of change that we want to bring about. If bigger donors also don't get educated. So yeah, I think all of our organizations who are like more than a decade old, I think, and have some sort of clout, some sort of some way of influencing donors also, I think it's a big task that we all have to educate all the time, which is it's a good way of thinking about the energy spent actually on donors. Is yes, they are also a primary constituency. So yes, great. Thanks, Anand. Anybody else
Thank you.
have any thoughts? Yeah.
Okay, I would like to just share.
Yeah, sure. Sure, sis.
Listening to both of you and now also, I think as organizations, we need to have bigger pictures. And when we have the bigger picture of the reality we are living in and towards which we are going to move in, we have to plan the constituencies with whom we are dealing, no? The donors as well as the people for whom we are working. And that's why Assist has in its name itself synergy. And our slogan is, it's like integrate, catalyze, and transform. So what happens is not by only the organization, or not even by the founders of the organization or the directors of the organization, but it is a synergy. If the bigger picture is viewed by all, and if I'm able to share the same bigger picture even with a donor, I think the passion is created, and any energy is by itself a moving force. It can never be stagnant. So it will have its own power of getting people together, getting the movement to be on its drive. No, so I think what matters is those who are in the positions of leading need to have a bigger picture and not smaller ones, and we need not be matching the possibilities of getting funds with the needs of the people. Rather, with the bigger picture, we have to map things. I think that is very important.
Yeah, and I think this bigger picture is essentially both the vision, mission, and change values that we sort of subscribe to, and to constantly have that bigger picture in mind when we're moving about things is so important. But I think, like Himani and Anand are saying, I think somewhere the everydays of an organization functioning, you can tend to sometimes lose the bigger picture and lose your way with the bigger picture. And that because the bigger picture sometimes feels very idyllic and very ideal, and you feel like that you need to be more practical with what you're doing every day. So it's an interesting combination. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the goal obviously is to have something that you're going towards and be very clear about what that thing is. And that's probably the entry point for most organizations, by the way, is what is the goal that every organization is moving towards. What is their big change mission, I think. But sorry, we have like a last 8 minutes, so if we have thoughts I'll address some logistics for the next webinar and other things. Any last thoughts? Somebody has any thoughts from today's sessions?
Yeah, so I think one reflection for me is most organization, if you look at it, I think you see the intention is always good and correct. But I think somewhere the priorities and the approach gets misplaced. And that's where I think things go wrong. I think even that's true for the company like the Culfeed that we were looking at today. Rishabh, if you look at the message Rishabh was writing, was very, he said, we are there for you, all those. But as people commented, he is not practicing what he might have been preaching. But I think the intention is to save the organization, the company, and the first reaction might have been to save money. And also I think that the priorities have been misplaced. So I think, how do we make sure that we are getting the right approach, and priorities are met? And I think those are critical points that remains a challenge, and maybe those are concerns that could still continue. Although most, I think, as I said, most organizations, team, the intention is to do good, to achieve, to succeed, but somewhere I think people go wrong in the approach or the setting the priorities.
Just want to add here.
I think all fair. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Himani, go ahead.
Or maybe like a question, because we
Go
are
ahead.
seeing two different organizations. One is who was for profit, and one is who's just like driving change. So even how you approach both the perspectives, like, because the stakes are high when you have to generate certain profit versus you have to generate certain kind of change. I think in terms of how you measure it, it's slightly different. I think you can shift the narrative, but in case of cult, it's very tangible, right? Okay, I am putting this much money, I want this much out of it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to evaluate change, I think it's very subjective. So maybe, I mean, I'm just contemplating that, given the two organizations, how you even approach when you are like looking at a tangible output like a money versus when you are looking at non for profits who just where the stakes aren't as high as the for profit. So
I also want to add here, Arundhati.
Go ahead, Anjali. Yeah.
Do the same thing. This is something that was mulling in my mind as I heard the story, Culfit story itself. I was imagining the organization took a decision, right? They at some point they assumed what their constituency was for that particular period. They did it probably not the best way, but they did have the humility to eventually also take back their decision and accept whatever people were asking for. Now, if I look at something that I have probably in a conflict zone of what I've been working, especially during lockdown, sometimes I think we have certain budgets, right? Do we spend it because there is a great need in the field? Is my constituency the stakeholder, which is the youth in the field who is struggling and disconnected? Is my constituency also the team that we work with? Because it is putting people at risk if you invest a lot in the field. And at some level, even an organization might say, we need to just get through this year to keep everyone safe. And at another level, you see other organizations literally on the feed day in and day out. So there's a lot of conflict that I feel when I think of a constituency during these times. Where do we, I mean, to whom do we owe more is something that I was thinking as, these months.
I think very fair, especially as an organization grows. Its constituency also becomes its own team members and looking after its team and making sure that that they are safe and doing well and leading lives of dignity and equal opportunity, etc. And I think I think these are I think COVID has thrown up a lot of ways for us to rethink organizations and how we really imagine change, how we imagine hurtling towards change, how that completely shifts and completely throws us off track. There's a very interesting article that I just thought of in that context that I'll send to Rupa as soon as this is over, or I'll just send to all of you on that thread that she started. I think it would be very interesting for you guys to read just how when I don't know if you guys heard about it. I think I'll quickly say the story. I think there was a I forget where this is, and if somebody's read it, please help me out. There was a fantastic bridge that was constructed. The best architects from all over the world were flown in. It was state of the art. They just, there's a river flowing by and they just, built this beautiful bridge with, and it was the pride of the nation, etc., etc. And then weather patterns changed, climate changed, and the entire flow of the river changed. So there's the bridge is on one side and now the river flows from somewhere else. And that's unexpected. It's not something that you could have prepared for. Yes, it was, what was it? where was this? I was, yeah. So Sister Selvi, you seem to know about it, but yeah, all of you seems to have heard about it. But yeah, it's fantastic. It's, I think, very, very interesting just to know that what kind of, are we building the kind of change? Oh, it was shared in the first session. Okay, well, then I'm sort of yeah. So I think when we think of COVID and organizations, what kind of change are we building that sort of keeps up with changing times, and is it change that adapts? Is it change that, you know, are we really investing in ways that I'm just there's been a lot of thoughts that are going around organizations at the time of COVID right now, but yeah, so these are all thoughts I'm going to leave you with, very stray thoughts today, purposefully open conversation today. It's meant to be a conversation that sort of opens you up. One homework for all of you, now that you're going back, and I'll address the homework that we gave yesterday, but one homework before we meet for the next webinars. When are they? 26th, 27th November? Rupa, just confirm.
Yes, yes.
26th, 27th November. I will be here. I hope all of you will be here. But basically, I want you all to think of now, given these two stories that you've heard, you yourself being a part of a third organization, what do you think are the elements that make up the personality of an organization? Okay, what in your mind, what are the main elements that make up the personality of an organization? I just want to park this as a thought in your mind, make it as a list somewhere. You don't have to send it in, but we will be discussing this in groups as soon as we come back in the webinar in November. So I don't want you guys to lose the train of thought that we have started with this wonderful discussion that has already started. Yeah, so I wanted to give it as homework just so that all of you have spent some time thinking about it and maybe listing it down. When you meet, I think we sort of rekindle this conversation, get into a framework, and then get into sort of dismantling, deconstructing that framework. There were a couple of questions, 3 or 4 people asked, and they were all the same. So I just wanted to reach out and say that the second question yesterday asked for action language, and action language essentially is when you commit to doing something, because the question basically said, okay, there are these deep structures in your organization, map 3 deep structures that you think that exist in your organization. And map those that you think you can do something about. And then in action language, write what you will do about them in the near future. So action language is basically, when will you do it? What will you do? How will you do it? Who will do it? Yeah, and where will you do it if that is in question at all? But essentially try to answer these questions of, be really specific about what it is that you will do to counter these power structures. This assignment is also going to be extremely crucial to our 2 webinars in November. So this assignment today and the assignment yesterday, please carry them, complete them and carry them to the webinars in November. Yesterday's assignment has to be mailed to Rupa by Saturday, I think. But please do bring your assignments. I think that will be very useful. It's a very interesting thing that we're going to do in those 2 webinars. I can't talk it up enough. I think I've talked it up as much as Shalini talked up Cult Fit now. So so that's I have to say. Sandhya, you had something to say?
Yes, ma'am. The question, please put it in the WhatsApp group, ma'am. So that
Yeah. I'll send it in the email. I'll send it in the email. No problem.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Angela's asking if we can move the timeline a bit, Rupa. I'll leave that to Rupa and your good negotiations with Rupa. I'm okay with moving the timeline. Shouldn't be a problem. But the sooner you do it, it's fresher in your mind. That's all. Yeah. Okay. So that's as much from my end today. I think it's been a slightly not as sort of focused as yesterday, but it's been an interesting overall day. Thank you so much, everybody, for showing up and interacting and being so present through 2 very long presentations. If this was in person, I would have been far more animated and I would have tried to make it more interesting. But it's so there are limitations to a virtual space that just make it very tough to be incredibly engaging. But I think Shalini did a fantastic job and I tried. But so thank you guys. If everybody can just turn on their videos, say bye before you leave, just so that just so we know everybody was here.
Thank you. Bye.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.